For 68 years, the official record said John Tarrant never ran a marathon that counted. That's what the governing body wanted you to believe. It isn't what happened. In 1958, a 17-pound boxing purse turned Britain's fastest long-distance runner into a ghost. The Amateur Athletic Association made sure you'd never learn what he did after they erased him. Someone made sure this story died quietly. Here's what the record books were rewritten to hide. In 1950s Britain, amateur sport had one rule above all others: no money ever for anyone. John Tarrant was a teenager from Buxton, poor, restless, and quick. At 17, he boxed 8 fights for cash, total earnings 17 pounds. He used it to buy running shoes. When he applied for an amateur athletics card 2 years later, he disclosed the money. The AAA didn't just deny him. They banned him for life, not from boxing, from running. Forever. He was 19 years old. The official story is simple. A professional athlete was correctly barred from amateur competition. That's the version the AAA filed and closed. Here's the first crack. Tarrant kept running anyway. Banned from entering races, he started jumping into them without a number, starting seconds after the gun, finishing ahead of men with official times. Spectators started calling him the Ghost Runner because he'd appear from nowhere, run faster than the field, and vanish before officials could throw him out. In 1960, running bandit style with no number, he beat the entire elite field in the Liverpool Marathon. His time was never recorded. In 1963, he ran 40 miles non-stop and set what would have been a world's best time. It went in no book anywhere. 9 separate governing bodies across 3 decades upheld the ban. Every appeal Tarrant filed was rejected in writing, on the same grounds, the 17 pounds, a debt that never expired. Now here's where the obvious explanation stops holding. If this were only about protecting amateurism, the ban should have ended once Tarrant proved himself harmless. One man, no sponsors, no earnings, just running for nothing. It didn't end. Other athletes caught taking far larger sums were quietly reinstated within a year or two. Tarrant's case stayed open for 17 years. That's not consistency. That's a decision made once and defended forever rather than reversed. Someone in that organization needed Tarrant's ban to stand as an example permanently, regardless of what he did next. Here's the part they never wanted followed. The AAA's amateur code wasn't really about 17 pounds. It was about who was allowed to represent Britain. Tarrant was a working-class miner's son, self-taught, with no club pedigree and no patron inside the federation. The men who sat on the appeals board came almost entirely from public school running clubs, the same institutions that had quietly waived professionalism questions for well-connected athletes before. Tarrant had no one in that room to advocate for him. His ban wasn't enforcement. It was gatekeeping, dressed as rule-following, and it held because the people who could have lifted it had no reason to. In 1969, under mounting embarrassment, the AAA finally granted Tarrant limited permission to compete in some events, but never marathons and never internationally. He was allowed back into the sport just enough to stop the complaints, never enough to compete for a country that had never claimed him. He died of cancer in 1975 at 42, having run some of the fastest ultradistances in the world, in a sport that still refused on paper to say he had run them at all. This is why you've likely never heard his name. Records aren't only kept to preserve history, they're kept to decide whose history gets preserved. Tarrant's fastest times exist in newspaper clippings and eyewitness accounts, not in any federation's ledger. Runners who trained beside him say he was faster than several men who did represent Britain at the Olympics that decade. None of that counts officially because the body that decided who counted had already decided about him, permanently, in 1958. It cost him a national vest he almost certainly earned. It cost the sport an honest record of who its best runner actually was. And it worked for 68 years because a ban that's never formally overturned doesn't need defending. It just needs silence. So here's the question nobody at that federation has ever answered. If the rule was really about the money, why was Tarrant the one man it never let go of? The 17 pounds was repaid in performance 1,000 times over, and the ban stayed on the books anyway. Somewhere there's still a file with his name on it, and a decision nobody signed their name to reversing. What would it take, even now, for them to admit whose record that finish line really belonged to?